All right, y'all. Welcome back for another conversation for this month's series. I'm Kendra Tillman. And in the last 5 years, I became a certified life and leadership coach. And my business evolved from a spiritual and professional growth conference for Christian women into what is now Strong Her Me Coaching and Consulting, where we help rising women leaders realize their mission through coaching, curriculum, and community. In honor of Women's History Month, we are releasing four real talk leadership conversations each Wednesday. The Secrets of Thriving Women Leaders weekly conversation series will help you uncover the hidden gems that only come when you sit down and talk with another woman about the joys and challenges of leading while keeping her soul well. And we have so much to unpack with today's guest, Dr. Summer Allen, as we dive into her new book, Lose the Debate: A Practical Guide to Intelligence and Successful Dialogue. So here's her book, and I cannot wait for y'all to hear this conversation that we're going to have. I think it's going to be so invaluable to your leadership journey. I learned so much in just what I have read so far, and also even me starting to think about when I'm working with clients who are wanting to have these courageous conversations that this book is going to teach us how to have. So I'm so excited to share Dr. Summer with you. She has served as an international organizational development specialist, a consultant, a C-level leadership coach, and a trainer for over 15 years for global organizations like Pepsi, Cisco, EA Sports, Essence, AIG, and Farmers Insurance. So to learn more about Dr. Summer and possibly add her to your payroll and support your team, you can visit eqstrategists.com. And you can also thank me later for that. So welcome to the conversation, Dr. Summer. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here, Kendra. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I was perusing, on LinkedIn one day, and I saw that you had released this book, and it was so compelling to me, like Lose the Debate. And okay, let me tell you why. So when I grew up in the type of home, like even as I was reading your book, I grew up in the type of home where we had what I like to call spirited debates. So we debated everything. We had so many different conversations about politics and racism. Like, so I'm a Southern born raised girl, and so these were the constant conversations that were happening in our household. And so when you fast forward to working life and even me having my own family, learning how to have conversations with people and not have it turn into, yelling or shouting or people just shutting down mentally and emotionally, is something that I have really had to work on and think through. And so to know that you actually wrote a whole book on helping us giving us a practical guide to emotional intelligence and successful dialogue, it made me extremely excited. Like, what kind of response have you received so far, just from the title alone of the book?
Questions I get are around the title. Why would I name it Lose the Debate? Who wants to lose, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I always think that's a hilarious question, but it makes sense. And I did
mm-hmm,
it on purpose. It was intentional. As you get into the book and you really understand it, the goal is to almost shift our mindsets. I think we've gotten to a place in society where it's about
mm-hmm,
win or lose. And
mm-hmm,
so the goal is, well, what if you lost? Like, what would be the worst that would happen? And in that process, what could you actually even learn if you go
mm-hmm.
into the mindset that it's not win or lose, and that if I lose, that is okay. Because at the end of the day, my goal is not to come into this space and to win, but really it's more to understand, to learn, to engage, to share. And so it's really lose the debate, lose the concept of having a debate, lose the concept of win or lose, and just really come to a space where we can actually have true dialogue with one another and just learn from one another.
Mm. Yeah, and that comes through so clear. As I was reading through your book, what makes a dialogue successful in your opinion?
It's two things. The two things that I find to be most valuable and to allow for true dialogue. And again,
Mhm,
it's not about debate. It is the dialogue that we're trying to have. And dialogue is when two people can come to a space and they can hear one another. And so the two components that I speak to quite often, as you know from the book, are curiosity. That's
Mhm.
one, a curiosity of myself to understand
Mhm.
how am I coming to this conversation, curiosity of the other person, what might be their perspective, but also courage to say the hard things in those moments when they need to be said. But the curiosity equips us to be able to say it in a way where I understand the other person enough where when I say it, it will land in a different way. And I'm curious enough to know when if I say something, another person gets triggered, I know how to really lean into that and really just kind of guide myself through their emotional space and help support them.
Mhm. And I'm smiling because even just you giving that quick synopsis that I actually have from the book, and those are the things that I specifically want us to highlight and talk about today. Um, and I want to read a couple of quotes from directly from your book where you talked about the aim of writing the book is to help teach us how to build mature responses to uncomfortable situations that make you feel good about yourself while making it easier for you to have courageous conversations. And why is it important for us to feel good about ourselves as we are engaging in these courageous conversations?
It's really important that we come into any dialogue, any situation where we feel good about ourselves. A, because that impacts our esteem, right? That's
Mhm,
one of the first things is that
mhm,
that's what gives me the courage to be
mhm,
able to say the things that I don't necessarily want to say, or just really be able to reinforce my boundaries. And so
mhm,
that esteem is necessary in order to have the courageous conversations. And when we think about what courageous conversations are, again, it could be giving feedback to a colleague, but it also
mhm,
can be about really something personal. It could be about how do we choose how to raise our kids. That's a great
mhm,
conversation. It could be how do we decide what to do with our aging parents, with our siblings, right?
mhm,
And it
mhm,
can also be about race and sexual orientation and gender. And so when we can walk into a conversation and we are clear about who we are, we understand our historical context around
mhm,
the topic that we're having, and we feel good and confident about these are my beliefs, but I'm also comfortable enough in myself to be open to hearing the thoughts and experiences of others. That's the only way it'll allow us to really be grounded in a conversation that can be fruitful. If I come in and I'm defensive or I'm angry and I don't even know these things,
mhm,
first thing, then that will derail the conversation. But
mhm.
we are and being comfortable in that and feeling good about ourselves is valuable to this process.
Do you find that people that tend to struggle with if you struggle with courageous conversations in your personal life, you're gonna struggle with them in your professional and vice versa?
Oftentimes I do, and I
Mhm,
wondered that before I started writing the book.
mhm,
So I actually started paying attention to it with my
mhm,
clients,
mhm,
and I realized there are just different aspects of life that some people just are not comfortable dealing with or talking about. And so if they show up in both of those spaces, then the behavior doesn't change, right? Now, if it's at work, we have a lot more opportunities to really have data-driven conversations. Those
mhm,
people often say, "Oh, it's easy for me to have courageous conversations at work." Yeah, if we're talking about data or we're having to lay people off because of the financial components of work, that's still separate, right? But when it comes to, I need to just have a conversation with you about your behavior and how your behavior is impacting the team, how your behavior is impacting our culture and how we get work done. There's no data up against that usually. And so what we have to do is really help frame what it is that we're trying to convey to the other person in a way that's thoughtful in order for them to understand and to create the change. That's when we usually have our biggest struggles, when the data just is not there.
mhm. Especially if you're talking when I think about your personal life, especially if you're dealing with a spouse, a partner, someone who always has all the facts, like you feel like you have to go into a courtroom, setting when you're talking to them.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm,
Those are really tough conversations when
mhm,
you engage with someone like that. And we've all had those people, they come, they
mhm,
want to spit out all of those facts. And this is where the aspect of lose the debate comes in. And so if you listen to those words in that moment, guess what? You can appreciate those facts that they're giving, and you don't have to feel defensive on the other side of that. It's like this is not a win or lose. If you give more facts than I give, that's okay. Maybe I just sit here and listen to facts. Say, you know what? You have way more information around this. I'm going to take it in. I'm going to go do some research around it just to formulate my own thoughts and opinions around that. And I appreciate you sharing that with me.
mhm.
But we
See,
normally
what
don't
you
do that, doing?
You made that sound so simple.
That's another thing about feeling good about
Mhm,
ourselves. It's managing your energy. Those
mhm,
words allowed me to manage
mhm,
my energy. Those
mm,
words kept me from getting triggered. Those words kept me from being defensive. Those words kept me from being frustrated. Those words allowed me to say, you know what? It's okay that they know more than me.
mm. Mm. One of the things that you said is you're making me think about one of the things that you talked about is how it's okay to enter into a courageous conversation and not have to explain your point of view, your perspective on everything, and to actually just listen to what the other person is saying.
Just listen. And that's why that curiosity of self is so important.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, again, we have to understand. I might have even grown up in a childhood. And the reason I wrote the book is a lot to do with my own self and what I was seeing in the world. But I grew up
Hmm.
in a perfectionist household. My grandmother raised me. And so everything was about, especially being a Black woman, was about
Hmm.
perfect. My name I was named Summer, intentionally, and how I dressed and how I wore. Everything was almost orchestrated.
Mm.
So we didn't spend a lot of time in a space of going into debate and dialogue, because normally it's like these are the things that are taboo and these are the things that are okay and acceptable in talking about. And so when I got into the world, I realized I didn't know how to have certain conversations. Not only did I not know how to have certain conversations because of that perfectionist component, I was defensive when I didn't know everything. And I felt
Mm.
like if I don't know it all, I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to engage. And so I just didn't. But I realized that was doing myself a disservice. And
Hmm.
so the ability to have enough courage of self, and enough self-awareness to know I don't know it all, and that's okay. And I'm going to go into this conversation anyway with the goal, maybe I'll just learn something.
Hmm. Hmm. It makes such a difference. Going into a conversation, having a goal in mind is what you talk about, and the importance of what your mindset is as you move into these conversations. So, how does our mindset impact the success of our conversations?
Has everything to do with it. Everything.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's why you saw in the book, we really talk about and push people into those very vulnerable aspects of their historical context, of their life,
Mhm.
of their upbringing, and understanding, who am I? What have been my past experiences? When it comes to whatever topic that you're in conversation around, identify what have been my past experience with this specific topic. As a result of, how do I feel about it? What are my emotions around it? An example
Mm.
that I use all the time is, if you're a parent and someone is talking about, maybe guns or anything, and
Mhm.
you're like,
Mhm.
okay, before I was a parent, I had a completely different perspective, mindset, and thought process around guns in our country. But now that I have a child, and my child is actually in school, and I see these school shootings happening every day, now there's an actual fear that exists within me, and a true driving passion that I have around protecting my child. And so
Mhm.
when I get into a conversation with someone about guns, I may be much more triggered and much more passionate because of the love that I have for my child. Now, then the question is, how do I then manage that? How do
Mhm.
I then get into a conversation and have an actual dialogue with someone where I can hear the different perspectives and not let those emotions and that deep passion drive me, but to still be able to create space for other people and their experiences that may be completely different from mine, and their opinions and their perspectives. And so when you talk about really understanding ourselves and knowing ourselves and being curious with ourselves, that is what really builds our mindsets, our past experiences, everything that we've gone through in life. And so if we are not analyzing our mindset proactively, it may hijack the conversation reactively.
Absolutely. What are my emotions? I heard you say, what are my emotions around this conversation? Because that is definitely going to impact how I am able to listen. Because even what we hear is not always what the person is even saying.
Yep. We
Yeah.
filter it through that emotion. So
Hmm.
if I come into it defensive, right, about it, then I'm listening for those things that already created my defensiveness. And so that's why we have to say, okay, let me just remove all of that and go into it curious, removing any preconceived notions, any beliefs about anything. I just want to be curious and truly hear, because only when we can do that, are we able to really lean into understanding the other person.
And that is a skill that you are actually teaching us, because it's not something that you're going to necessarily pick up right away. It's going to take time, because that constant dealing with your emotions. Honestly, for me, when I was reading your book, I could see how so much of what you were teaching us is something that I've had to do in my relationship with my daughter.
Yeah.
My daughter is a young adult, she's 22 years old, and I had to learn how to have conversations with her that didn't turn into like this explosion of we are all the way up here in the conversation. And it was hard. It was very hard to learn how to disagree with a person. Like you're sitting there like fuming, disagreeing, and then learning how to on the inside.
Calm
Okay.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called self-soothing. It's called
Hmm.
self-regulation.
Hmm.
And you're right. One of the things I do appreciate you bringing up is
Hmm.
this book is not about perfection. You
Hmm.
will not read this book, take all
Hmm.
the notes, highlight all the things, and walk away and be perfect. What
Hmm.
this book creates is a heightened sense of self-awareness
Hmm.
in order for you to continuously grow. And so I always tell people it's not about perfection, it's about continuous progress. You'll come back to this book several times. Not only that, you'll fail several times. And let me tell you why. Once you're aware of some of the behaviors,
Hmm.
thought processes that you have, then you actually can hold yourself more accountable. But that doesn't mean that accountability creates behavior change tomorrow. It just
That's
allows
right.
you an avenue to continuously measure up against. And so,
Hmm.
even as I wrote the book and live life, I identified that triggers still happen. Unconscious triggers that I have still surface. I still
Hmm.
have a tendency where I may not say the most perfect thing, and that's okay. But in every moment, what I do is I use those as data points. I use those as learning moments, and I use those to really dive deep and say, what happened? What allowed you to still, even writing this book,
Hmm.
find yourself triggered? And so for that, it allows for exploration and growth.
I like what you say. It allows for exploration and growth. Like, what if we approached these conversations like this is an opportunity for me to explore who I am, even in this conversation? Who am I when I'm talking to this person?
Right.
And how can I grow? How could I be different as a result of this conversation that we're having? And to me, like when you approach it from that perspective, it makes it feel more like you're expanding on the inside versus shutting down because I don't like what you're saying. I don't agree with you. You misunderstood me. You don't, you should see it the way that I see it. If you were a rational person, if you were kind and loving as I am, you would see it the way that I see it. So I just think hearing you say that is really powerful. And it brings me to what you talk about. Like, so you have a model basically that you have given us a framework. So, as people are listening to this conversation, you actually have laid out a framework for us to kind of help walk us through what does this actually look like, right? If I'm listening and I'm like, okay, you know what, I do want to make these changes. Dr. Summer is helping me see this in a different way. Let's give them like just a highlight overview of what the actual model is, and then there's a couple of points in your model that I want to highlight.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's called the actor model, which
Mhm,
I
mhm.
find, as I wrote it, um, a little bit ironic,
Yeah.
right? So it's five components that we walk people through in terms of like what are the key components of truly having an effective dialogue. And so the first one is A, and the A component stands for appreciating diversity of opinions. And we talk about that. What that means is being able to appreciate that people have different lived experiences, people have different perspectives, different perceptions, and different opinions. And it doesn't make them it right or wrong, it makes it theirs. And so what that
Mhm,
means is our ability to appreciate the diversity of the opinions of others. And only after I wrote the book did I start going into social media and going specifically like into Instagram or Facebook and looking at the comments. Because I'm a big person on comments. You know, you see something, but then it's like, what, you go run straight through the comments, right? So
Absolutely.
as I go through the comments, what I identify as this is lacking so greatly in our society. Appreciating just someone's opinion, someone's perspective, someone's perception. It's either right or wrong. It's either my way or no other way. But it's not that yes and that exists. It's like you can have an opinion about something. I can have an opinion about something. And guess what? Both can actually be true. They can
Yes.
both be true.
Mhm.
And that's where the beauty of dialogue comes in. That's where creativity and innovation sit, when two people with divergent opinions can come together and share those different thoughts and actually create something brand new. So that's what the A is in the actual model. The C is curiosity. And so curiosity is the foundation of any courageous conversation and any really successful dialogue. And it's about allowing ourselves to really engage in what I call expansive thinking.
Mhm.
When we talk about expansive thinking, that is the yes and thinking. That is allowing my brain the opportunity to say, what are the other possibilities that exist within this space outside of my own lived experience? Because again, mine is not universal. It's unique to me. Another aspect of curiosity is curiosity as a mindset, like really walking through the world with a mindset of curiosity, in every conversation engaging in that mindset. The two biggest pillars within curiosity, though, are curiosity of ourselves and really, really creating a high level of self-awareness, understanding who we are, what our past is, and then curiosity of others. And when we talk about curiosity of others, we talk about being curious and understanding, asking yourself those same questions. Well, who are they? What might be their past experiences? What might be some of their triggers? And approaching curiosity as a mindset, not in a space of judgment, but true, pure, authentic curiosity. Because I don't want people to go out and start asking questions with attitude, like, but like, well, why did you do that? That's not curiosity. That's not curiosity. It's how you frame it and really what your outcome is that you're looking for in terms
And
of.
you even give us some phrases for curiosity in the book.
Oh,
Mhm.
with every one of the different
Mhm.
components of the model, we will give you actual verbiage. So,
Mhm.
like, well, what does that sound like? Well, how would I say that? So, we give you those actual words as a guide. Of course, we encourage everybody to put it in their own words, but it gives you a sense and understanding of, like, what does this actually sound like?
Mhm.
The next component in the model is T, which is triggers. This is one of my
Mm.
favorites. Yeah, this is one of my favorite ones. Because oftentimes there are a lot of books around courageous conversation. There are a lot of
Mhm.
books around, and they give you a lot of different frameworks, but nobody talks about the emotional component of the conversation.
Mhm.
Nobody talks about that dirty word of triggers,
Mhm.
that we can get emotionally triggered just like that. And so, what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do as I wrote this book, is I wanted to really highlight traumas and triggers. What are our past traumas that allow us to show up the way we're showing up in conversations? Whether it's I'm scared to have those types of conversations, or maybe sometimes I'm a bit aggressive in these conversations. What are the past experiences that are driving my behavior
Mhm.
when I get emotional? Because guess what?
Mm.
When you talk about a courageous conversation, it is grounded in emotion, fear,
Mhm.
anxiety, frustration. I'm usually only having these conversations because they're necessary. And in those, all those emotions are existing. And so what we talk about in this book is um, why and how triggers can derail a courageous conversations, and the strategies that you can utilize and implement in order to deal with those triggers in the moment, proactively and reactively. So it's three aspects of it. How do I understand my triggers proactively before I even go into the conversation?
Mhm.
One of the questions I ask myself is, as I'm about to have this conversation, what might trigger me in this?
Mm.
And it might be an aspect of the topic or the person.
Mm.
I know some of their behavior,
Whew.
I know some of their strategies, and I know those things trigger me. And how can I prepare myself for that?
Mm.
And then on the reactive side, if you find yourself being triggered, asking yourself what happened and why. And so
Mm.
it's really powerful to take that into consideration. The fourth one is emotional regulation. That's the E of the actor model, emotional regulation. And emotional regulation absolutely comes right behind triggers, because we want you to really understand what your triggers are and understand that we have them. And then the next key is, but how do I emotionally regulate in that moment? How do I understand the amygdala hijack in terms of I'm triggered and now my brain, all it wants to do is defend, or it either wants to fight or flight, right? So either I'm going to freeze and shut down and just remove myself from the conversation, or I'm going to become aggressive. That's an actual neurological response when emotions are high, and it's called the amygdala hijack. We think these things just happen. No, it's actual brain science behind it, but we can actually control it. And
Mhm.
so control it through these aspects of what we call the power of choice, choosing the response. That's what we get an opportunity to do. What do I want to say versus what my body is telling me to say
Mm.
versus what my body is telling me to do. And so it's the different strategies of emotional regulation really come around making sure you're telling yourself the right story, curiosity as always, pausing and taking a breath. Such an underrated activity. Let somebody, like whoever's listening, the next time someone triggers you, literally just pause and take a breath. And the release of the body and the energy is so powerful in that moment, and it gives your brain an opportunity to calm itself down and think. And then the next one is the assuming positive intention, which is one of my favorites and one of my biggest life lessons,
Mm.
is positive intention. We don't have time to go into it because I could get really verbose around assuming positive intention, but I encourage the readers to look at that and understand what assuming positive intention is and the true value that it brings to our ability to regulate and to be able to be curious and see others. And then the last component of the actor model is R for respectful listening. And so if we've been triggered in this conversation, we found ourselves in a space where we were able to emotionally regulate, then we have an opportunity to truly listen. But it's not just listening, but it's truly respectful listening through the lens of curiosity. It's respectful listening that is really active and really trying to understand what the other person is saying. It's out of our emotions. And so that's why respectful listening is last, because you cannot actually get into the space of active listening or listening through empathy if your emotions aren't regulated. Because what you're doing if you're unregulated in your emotions is if you're responding through defense, you're responding through anger. And so you're not necessarily listening to the other person. But only after you're able to calm your emotions down are you able to move into the space of respectful listening. And so I put that in the book specifically because that's when you know you're actually in a space of emotional regulation, when you found yourself in the ability to be able to listen in a way that the emotions just don't allow us to do. And so that's the model in a
Mm.
nutshell. And so again, 5 components that really allow us to guide ourselves through a courageous conversation.
Mm. Yeah. I just feel like you really gave us very specific tools. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is this is a book not just based on observation or clients that you work with, but it's research based. And that's something that you really let people know. This is based off thousands of experts that
Yes.
have worked with people and they've observed behavior, and this is the result
Yes.
of so much of that research. And to me, hopefully that even solidifies it even more when people have questions about, okay, can this really work? Right? Because I think that's also part of why we don't engage in courageous conversations, because we're wondering, will it make a difference?
Right.
Is it actually going to work? And then even the things like, I'm going to quote, try, that even that you shared with us today, is it going to make a difference?
Yeah, it will.
Mhm.
Like you said, the aspect of it being research based, it was
Mhm.
so important to me because again,
Mhm.
a lot of research around courageous conversations, but a
Mhm.
lot of it doesn't necessarily ground itself in actual research. So this is grounded in psychology, in
Mhm.
science, in behavior modification, and so that is really the only way to have a courageous conversation. It is solely about me. So as I'm reading the book, I always tell people as you read the book, it is a book about you. And people are like, we're
Mhm.
in a conversation with somebody else. What if they haven't read the book? The book is about you.
Mhm.
And the reason it's about you is because you cannot make anything change or work that's outside of yourself.
Mhm.
So if you implement the strategies over time, it will work. Because one of the key components in there is about having the courageous conversation to even set boundaries. And so if you find that it doesn't work, but you're doing the work, then it's an opportunity for us to explore what may be some of the nuances in other people that may be keeping us from really getting to an outcome or finding a solution. But only once you've done kind of that work, are you even able to have the vocabulary or the insight to really kind of see what those challenges might be. And so it will work. Will it work just like that? Probably not. Will it work
Mm.
after a few conversations, after a few moments of self-reflection? Absolutely.
Mm. So you're encouraging us to pick up and read this book if we want to work on us, not our spouse, not the people at work.
That's what people say. I'm buying one for my husband, my wife. I've had so many people say, I'm buying one for my family. That
Mhm.
has been a key
Mm.
thing that I keep hearing. They'll read it and they'll get into like page 20, like, I'm buying it for the whole thing. Because it's hard to go through the process and
Mhm.
everybody else not be on board, right? Because it's like,
Mhm.
I know this. We all need to know this. And I've had
Mhm.
so many leaders, like you say, buy it for their team because now it creates a culture of how we're going to behave, how we're going to communicate, how we're going to show up. And curiosity becomes a key component of our communication culture within our team. And so you're right. While you can't make those changes for other people, oftentimes if you just kind of set up like a group discussion around it, it allows us to learn so much about ourselves and each other in
Yes.
the process.
Yeah, and you showed us how to have those conversations when they get where they need to be courageous. So that actually reminds me, there's two or three things I want to make sure that I bring up because I thought they were so valuable. You talked about what it means to be courageous, and it actually may not be what we think. What are your thoughts about when you say have a courageous conversation? What do you mean when you talk about courageous versus maybe what we might even be imagining?
Oftentimes when we think about the word courageous, we
Hmm.
think of I need to, really arm myself in order to go. And so we almost think that the courage is arming us for war, right?
Hmm.
But what I
Hmm.
talk about in the book is courage is actually vulnerability because courage is not necessary without fear.
Hmm.
Courage is not necessary without fear. So there's something that exists in that conversation that we're fearful of, we're hesitant of, and then we're shying away from. And so what is required is that emotional stamina in order to be able to dive into the aspect of what am I scared of? And that's the vulnerability there. Am I scared of rejection? Am I scared of being wrong? Am I scared of hurting someone else's feelings? What am I
Hmm.
scared of that's actually making this conversation courageous for me? And the only way to tap into that is to be vulnerable with yourself and ask yourself those questions, because then you'll be able to really have the self awareness to guide yourself through the right conversation.
Mm. I love you explaining that because so in one of the other conversations that I've had through the Thriving with the Thriving Women Leaders series, one of the things we talked about is a softening that needs to happen sometimes. And when you explain the courage that we have is really taking off the armor, not going in armored up and ready to like, I'm ready for battle. That's, when we think of a courageous conversation, we might think of it in that way. I'm going in here with all the ammunition, all the facts. I'm ready to tell you what I've been thinking, what I've been feeling, how, all these things. And what I hear you saying is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
you hold that.
Yeah.
You hold your truth in a very different space because you now realize what are the things that really are challenging me in this
Yes.
conversation. And even when we think about courageous conversation, like the way you listen as you approach like this vulnerability of self, you
Hmm.
should create a level of self-awareness where you really understand what is the underlying thing that exists here for me. What is the root cause of what I'm experiencing? And I'm just one of this wasn't even a courageous conversation, but it's self awareness that I went through the other day with my goddaughter. She was having a moment. She's a teenager, like 19 years old,
Hmm. Hmm.
having a moment, and she was really upset with her girlfriend. She was like, she's late. She's gonna miss this flight, and I told her this, that, and the other. And I had to pause, and I said, okay, so you and she got up. The girlfriend got upset. I said, why did she get upset? She says, because I'm always fussing. I said, well, let's dig into that. I said, what were you really feeling when you said that to her? And she was like, well, it's our first semester at college away from each other, and I just don't want her to miss this flight.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was it. She's like, I
Mm-hmm.
miss her. I'm ready to see her, and I don't want her to miss this flight. The
Mm-hmm.
way that she expressed it was, you better not miss that flight in the morning. You need to pack, get off the phone. Like, that's how it came out. But it's like, it was just a slow internet. But what were you trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
That's that vulnerability. And sometimes if you don't tap into that vulnerability, it's hard to soften that dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually made me emotional. It really did. It truly made me emotional because of course, I'm thinking about family members right now. But it's a willingness, being vulnerable. It really does take courage to tell people this is what this is what I'm actually feeling, and especially I would even think, to be honest, in a work setting, I would think it's probably even more challenging because these are not family members, right? And so the vulnerability could be used against you, right? The willingness to do that. But are you still going to do it anyway, right? Are you still going to lead from this place and maybe be an example to other people, and they can see that, hey, yes, this is what vulnerability may cost you something, but the reward on the other side of who you are as a person and how you can be more authentic as a leader is going to show up in a much greater way by you doing that.
I love that. You're 100% right. We
Mm.
talk about this all the time when we do workshops around the model. People say all the time, well, how do you bring this into the workplace? It's completely transferable into the workplace, even
Mhm.
much more so now, because people are starting to realize we bring our lives with us,
Yes.
bring our emotions with us to work. They do not stay at home when we go into that office. They come with us. And as a result of that, we have to start having more real human conversations with one another, even
Mm.
around accountability, how we engage with one another, all of these things. And so for leaders, it's really powerful to be able to be that leader that can model the behaviors of curiosity, of courage, of authenticity, all three of those things. And so when you do that, what you're doing is you're creating the culture. And I say sometimes, if you find yourself being able to engage authentically in yourself, courageously, and having the curiosity, but it doesn't necessarily land in the organization, don't blame yourself.
Mm.
Yourself.
Mm.
Continue. But no, sometimes it's a cultural challenge as well. And so, again, that's why when we go into organizations, we use this book as a culture component. Again,
Mm.
emotional intelligence, culture and the climate. Because if these things can't be implemented, we have to identify why.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, a cultural change that needs to happen. Yeah, the us being more human with each other, I feel like is what your book is giving us permission to do, is just be more human. And um so I thank you for writing this, and it's very valuable. And I actually I'm looking forward to recommending it to clients and working with them through some of these exercises, because this is a common question, is how do you have these kinds of conversations? Like, if this is a skill that you actually have to learn to have. And so I have honestly so many more questions I could ask you, but I'm going to use some restraint because I want to make sure to give you enough time. Is there anything else that you really wanted to share that maybe I didn't even ask as a question, if there was something that's lingering that you want to share? And then I would love for you to share how people can connect with you beyond this conversation.
Thank you. I think if I had to leave, the audience with anything, again, I want to reinforce and reiterate that the book is not about perfection. It really is about
Mhm.
continuous growth and progress. And if you get an opportunity to get the book and to read through it, I encourage you to have pen and paper close to you, highlight, take notes, but also engage in dialogue with others to really gain insight into yourself and to different components of the book. It's one that I say it probably won't be a read in 2 days or 2 nights, right? It's one of those that you'll read over time in
Mhm.
order to continuously absorb. And so I just hope that you get out of it what I intended and that you enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed writing it and working with clients around it. And so I'm just thankful for the opportunity that you've given me today, Kendra, and I appreciate it.
Okay.
Oh, and to get in touch with me, that was another one.
Mhm,
How do you get in touch?
mhm,
I'm on LinkedIn. As
mhm.
so you can go to eqstrategist.com. And those are the ways to get in touch with me. If you want to just message me through LinkedIn, through EQ Strategist, or Dr. Summer Allen on LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Summer. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As I'm thinking about my conversation with Dr. Summer, I'm thinking about the maturity that it requires for us to be able to have these kinds of conversations. And I hope that listening to this conversation has given you some inspiration to have a conversation that you know that you've been meaning to have and that you want to have. And I feel like she's given us everything, all the tools that we need in order to be able to move forward on that. And so, again, as a part of this Thriving Women Leaders series, Secrets of Thriving Women Leaders series, this conversation around courageous conversations, I think, is one of the secrets that we all need and we have the power to employ in our businesses, in our personal lives. And it's going to help us move forward in ways that maybe we had not even anticipated. And before you leave, I just want to invite you to have a conversation with me, a one on one conversation with me. I believe so much in the power of us knowing our strengths and leaning into those strengths for the work that we feel called to do or created to do, or even just the work that we're doing right now that we just want to do at a better level, at a different level. And so, because of that, I provide what I call a Colby A mini session. The Colby A is a tool that you can use on your leadership journey to help you learn more about your own strengths that you possess, your contributions, the problem solving when you're at your best. How do you solve problems and how can you best support those around you? How can you also respect and appreciate the strengths of others? And so if you book a Colby A mini session with me, I offer it as a complimentary session where you get a 45-minute debrief and a laser coaching session that will equip you to activate your problem solving strengths so you can lead more authentically in business or in ministry work. And you can learn more about that when you head over to strongher.me Colby mini session. Strongher.me Colby mini session. All right, y'all, I have had a wonderful time hosting this Secrets of Thriving Women Leaders series. And if you missed any of them, I encourage you to go back and listen to all of them, pull out some action items for yourself that you could do. And remember, until I talk to you next time, work your plan and watch God work. Bye, y'all.